Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And, okay, before we get into this one, it is time once again for one of my, I guess, favorite segments. I don't even know if you'd call it segments or clarifications or what have you, but it's a little part of the review that I like to call,
"Can I just get some goddamn tater tots?"
So, yes, today I am looking at a Disney movie, and as of the time of recording, the world has gone through another one of its shit shows. Wow, what a fucking shock in 2025 America, that there's another controversy, there's another tragedy, there's another tearing asunder of political views on certain issues, and there's been a lot of shit going on, and one of the end results is now people calling for a boycott of all things Disney, which would mean basically boycotting 90% of the planet, which I am not here to cast judgments on anyone. If you are for the boycott, if you're not going to boycott, I believe every person must do as their conscience dictates. So please do not take this as my endorsement or non-endorsement of certain people, places, things, and movements. It's just a movie I'm going to review. Okay? Please do not take this as anything more than a movie I am reviewing, a movie that was made and came out before this current mess, and, there you go. Okay? So, I don't know. I know some people would think it just beastly of me to even consider doing anything Disney related at this time, and others would say, yeah, stick it. It's like, I'm not coming down on either side here, folks. I'm reviewing a fucking movie, that is all. Okay, so let's move on. So I decided that I wanted to review this film. I had a choice of doing this one or the live action Lilo and Stitch, and I might get to that one, but I'll be honest, I was much more curious about this film, because this is a film that came out with the traditional amount of Pixar and Disney hype. It had a lot of trailers, a lot of commercials, and I remember seeing those and going, okay, maybe I'll put that one on the list of possible review subjects. And then it just sort of all stopped, and you didn't hear anything about it. Now, again, I preference that I was in the middle of a cross-country move this past summer, so a lot of things kind of came and went without me really registering them, but it just seemed like this movie came out and then it quietly vanished and nobody said anything, which is really bizarre for a Pixar film. So I want to also preference with this, and longtime listeners and viewers of Drive Home Reviews will already know this, but for new folks, this is kind of an important thing to put out there. I have never been a fan of Pixar. And I stress that I don't dislike Pixar. I find all of their movies okay. I don't think any of them are outright bad. I don't think. But I have never been one of these people that are just bawling their eyes out at a Pixar movie. That, oh, it's so deep, it's so this, it's so that, it made me cry, la 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 la. you know, and I'm not mocking, honestly. I'm not. If a movie touches you, if it speaks to you, if it elicits an emotional reaction, then it's done its job. And I do not belittle your emotional connections to these movies. For me, they have always been just, all right, that happened. Okay, yeah, okay, Up, yeah, Toy Story, woo, you know. I've never really connected with one. Outside of Monsters, Inc., I did really enjoy Monsters, Inc., but I think that's owed more to the old school comedy team kind of energy that Mike and Sully have, and that kind of speaks to what I enjoy. So I already know that when a Pixar film comes out, that I am probably not going to be the target audience for it. But what made me interested about this one is that I don't think there has been a target audience. I haven't heard anybody talk about this movie. I've heard nobody review this movie. Nobody has worked up any hatred for it, like they have for things like Cars, and they haven't worked up any hardcore, this is the most beautiful thing ever, like they have for Inside Out, Toy Story, or Up. You know? It's just kind of there. And that's interesting to me from Pixar, because I think that's something that they have fallen into the trap of. And I think their creators are also feeling that. Because the only thing I did hear about this film was one of the directors, I think, was giving an interview about the lack of success of this movie. And he said, you know, everybody is on us all the time about, you need something original. You're just doing another Toy Story sequel. You know, why don't you put out anything original? And then we put out something original and nobody goes and sees it. So, you know, what do you want? You know, you kind of feel his frustration through the article. So, yeah, so I was interested to check this one out and see what maybe was it that has elicited such a non-response from people. So let's discuss it. All right, so let's talk about the story first off. So our story centers on Elio, a young boy who is recently orphaned. His parents died off screen, and he is now under the guardianship of his aunt, who is in the military, and this is someone who was not planning on kids anytime real soon, and suddenly has an 11-year-old dropped in her lap and is trying to figure out how to realign her life and all of that. So Elio is feeling disconnected and unwanted and like he's a burden, and at the National Air and Space Museum, he wanders into a display that talks about the Voyager space probe out there looking for alien life, and it suddenly just hypnotizes him. First off, before I get into anything else, this movie scored big points with me right off the bat by having Kate fucking Mulgrew as the voice of the museum narrator talking about the Voyager space probe. Like, and at first I couldn't tell, but then she said Voyager, and I was just like, fuck me! And I had to rewind and listen to it again, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely her. Nobody says Voyager like she does. So this movie gained some huge points with me right off the bat. I also got to say, just going off on a little bit of a tangent here, I am appreciative of the level of esoteric sci-fi Easter eggs that this movie incorporates. For instance, the scientist who discovers the way to communicate with aliens, his name is Melmac. And if you don't know that, then you are way too young to know that. I'm almost positive there is also a Killer Clowns from Outer Space reference, like a very subtle one, of the outside view of the space station or whatever that Elio ends up on looks a lot like the poster for Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I also think one of the characters, Gordon, who we'll talk about here in a second, I think he is also a reference to Alf, because anybody who remembers Alf knows that Gordon Shumway was his real name. So I'm very appreciative of the level of not just very blatant sci-fi references that a lot of these movies put in, like, you know the obvious ones, and they have an obvious one to Star Trek where they show the live long and prosper sign. I'm holding it up right now because I still think that this is the old format where you actually see me and you can see me doing the hand signal, but so yeah, it's radio, not TV now. Anyway, so yeah, I appreciate that level of nerdism that speaks to me. So anyway, so after this encounter, Elio becomes obsessed with the concept of being abducted by aliens. And right away, here's one of my problems with this movie. Again, I understand this is made for children. All right, so I get that. Please don't at me. But here, just from my life experience, here's the first sign to me that they should have gotten this kid into some kind of therapy, which probably would have been a good thing anyway, due to him having clear survivor's guilt and post-traumatic stress and all this. So therapy probably would have been a good thing for him at any rate. But this is definitely a warning sign that he needed someone to talk to, because I don't know what movies or TV shows this kid is watching, but I have never in all my years heard a retelling of alien abduction that made it sound like something I wanted to be a part of. Like, ever. I don't know what part of being snatched, the missing time, the lost memories, the experiments, the probing, what part of that made him think that it was going to be like one giant spring break? Which I guess, when you really sound it out, I guess it does sound like spring break, but for somehow he got that knowledge in his head. And I personally think if his aunt wanted to cure him of this, desire to be abducted by aliens, she should have shown him Fire in the Sky, or the Dwayne Barry episode of The X-Files. That would have undone it right quick.
They drilled my teeth. They drilled holes in my damn teeth!
But I digress. So Elio becomes obsessed with the idea of being abducted by aliens because he is convinced that being abducted by aliens is going to be a better life than the life he has on Earth currently. Again, I don't know where he gets this idea. I'm sorry to harp on this, but it's really confounding to me why he thinks this. I understand that from a kid's movie perspective, it's supposed to be like a Hogwarts kind of thing. You have a bad home life, and so you're thinking of this mystical, magical place where you're accepted and you're the greatest human being that ever lived. You're the chosen one. This self-insert fantasy about being the most perfect and specialist human that ever existed. I understand that that's what it's kind of feeding into, but again, the alien abduction has just never, in anything I've ever heard, come across as Hogwarts. And Hogwarts is pretty awful when you think about it. So, long story short, Elio gets his wish. He gets his wish because, as it turns out, in a wonderfully convenient plot twist, that his aunt's job in the military is to head up this, the realigning of satellites and satellite dishes and, read outer space, so he's able to get in there and send a message out into space. Because if he was just a regular kid whose guardian wasn't in the military and who wasn't stationed at, a space microphone thing, the movie wouldn't have happened. So, let's hear it for cinematic payoff.
Ooh, how convenient!
Oh yeah, it's raining cinematic payoff.
But anyway, so he is abducted, and it turns out that the aliens are the nicest, smartest, most wonderful things, and he's the best, and everything's happy. And yeah, there's a bad guy, but he easily outsmarts him, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So, I'm trying to ease my way into this because I want it to be clear that I do not believe that this is a terrible movie. I don't believe that it is a bad movie or an incompetent one. But it's a very bland and uninspired movie. Very. Because, okay, as previously stated, I have never felt that Pixar was this deep storyteller, but a lot of people do. So there's got to be something to that, right? And I think that Pixar has kind of painted itself a little bit into a corner where everyone throughout the early stages of their existence, the critics, the fans, everybody just kissed their ass about how brilliant they were and how great they were and how deep their movies were. And I think that has put a pressure on them to keep that streak going. And when it doesn't happen, when you can't settle on a narrative device, or you can't tell a emotionally driven story in a significant way, it shows. It's kind of the same issue that Marvel is facing. When the first phase, or the first couple phases of the Marvel movies came out, people had nothing but praise for them. Retroactively now, people are like, Iron Man 2, Thor the Dark World. But at the time, everything leading up to Endgame, people loved. And now they've been around so long and they've set the bar so high that when movies don't hit that, now everyone's like, oh, Marvel sucks. Oh, Marvel's terrible. Oh, it's not the same. When in fact, their movies aren't terrible. Their movies are still pretty damn good. But because they're not hitting that same mark, or because the audience has come to expect it, now they're having a harder time exceeding expectations. And I think that's one of the problems here with Elio. I think they have set out to try to tell one of their more in-depth stories. But to my eye, it feels like this is one of the most unfocused of the stories. I don't get what Elio learns. I don't get what he gains from this. I don't see how he is in any way changed. He changes, but it's very unearned. So he's abducted by these aliens, and it's everything he ever wanted. It's Willy Wonka's. It's Sesame Street. It's the greatest treehouse of all time. And it's a place where all of the aliens praise him as the greatest, the smartest, the most handsomest. They have statues to the fucker. And then suddenly when they decide it's time for the Act 3 all is lost moment.
The all is lost moment!
Then suddenly Elio shifts, and now he's learning to understand his aunt, and now I can't even say anything else. He doesn't really change. He acts with the same impulsive nature, the same single-mindedness that to achieve his goals that he did earlier in the film. And yet, we're supposed to believe that he's experienced some kind of character growth. And I see where they were going with it, but they didn't do it all the way through. And what they were trying to go for, I think, so we're introduced about midway through the film to the single redeeming character in the film, and that is Glorden, who is the young son of our antagonist, who's a little slug creature. And Glorden is fucking awesome. I love Glorden. Glorden was the best. I wish the movie had been about Glorden. He reminds me very much of Neil from Paranorman, in the most delightful ways. And I would have seen a whole movie about Glorden. And he and Elio become friends, because one of the things that his aunt is always on him about is making friends, but Elio is dead set against making friends. He just uses people who want to be his friend to kind of achieve his goal of getting abducted by aliens. Again, therapy would have helped. Anywho, and it's here that I have a feeling that there was a separate draft of this script that was a lot different, because Glorden is portrayed in his voice and in his mannerisms and in his reaction to things as a much younger character to Elio. And I get the feeling that in other versions of the script, Glorden was meant to be kind of a little kid that Elio now had to take care of. That it was a situation that he didn't ask for, wasn't prepared for, but now has to do, and has to sacrifice things he wants in order to take care of this more helpless life form, but sacrifices them willingly because he loves him. And there are elements of that in this. You can see parts of it, but they portray Glorden as more of a peer. Like, I think he and Elio are kind of meant to be the same age, because Elio refers to him as a friend. And I think somewhere along the lines it changed. So finding this connective thread and this common ground with his aunt, which again I think was meant to be a much larger part of the story, doesn't really happen. Or it happens, but in a way that is disconnected from the other elements that have gone on. I think there was supposed to be a moment where, because they send a clone of Elio back to Earth to masquerade as him, so his aunt doesn't get suspicious, and Elio gets jealous because he thinks that his aunt likes the clone a lot better. Yeah, she liked the clone a lot better because he wasn't acting like a dipshit. And again, understanding a child going through grief, and it's a hard thing, processing, I get all that, but still, acting like a dipshit. And I don't know if that was supposed to, in some version of the story, teach Elio that he should not act like a dipshit, and that maybe if he put in some effort, that maybe the world wouldn't be so ugly and so hard for him. But you have to meet it halfway. You can't just expect to go off somewhere where everything is perfect and beautiful and exactly the way you want it, and everybody just kisses up to you. But again, I think that's what they were going for, but the message is completely undercut because he does go to a place. He's right. He's proven right. All of his bad behavior, all of his bad decisions are validated because he's proven right. There is a place out there where everyone thinks he's the greatest and he doesn't have to put in any effort. You know, it's yeah, I really do feel like there was a separate version of this. And then rewrites happen and different things happen as they do in the making of a movie or in the making of any creative piece. And certain scenes were left in, but they were not connected to the new narrative thread. So as a result, you have a dozen or more narrative threads flying around and nothing really tying them all together. So even by the standards of a Pixar movie, which again, I have never felt have been that strong, but again, other people do, this film doesn't achieve its goal of trying to teach us something or have that deeper meaning. It's all just flopping around all over the place. And as such, it makes the film very unpalatable. I don't want to be too cruel to it, because that's to say that it is completely without merit. And that's a falsehood. Again, Glorden is a fantastic character. Love Glorden. I even enjoy the way Glorden's story kind of concludes in his relationship with his big warmonger father. Wraps up, because it wraps up in a way that I do feel made more sense and was much more satisfying. Again, the whole movie should have been about Glorden and his father, and I think it would have worked a lot better. So yeah, so the only thing that a Pixar movie really has going for it, it doesn't nail. You know? And that makes everything else just kind of bleh. Like, the only other thing I could think of to talk about is maybe the animation, but, you know, I'm sorry, guys, and I've said this before, too. I am completely 100% in awe and respectful of artists of all kind. And computer artists have a talent and an understanding of things that I couldn't in a million years grasp. My best friend is a computer animator, and I know for a fact how much talent it takes to come up with and make real those visions. But I'm just not impressed by the gorgeous CGI animation. I'm sorry, I'm more impressed by someone who painted it by hand. Sorry, maybe that makes me a snob, and I'm not trying to belittle anyone's profession, but that's just the way it is, guys. So yeah, the film has some beautiful sequences, but they all do. That's nothing new or spectacular. Like, even the character designs, like, outside of Glorden, all the characters, all the aliens are just kind of shapeless and uninteresting and bleh. So there's not even any big visual elements to get me excited. It's just kind of there. So if I had to vocalize what I think maybe the issue was with this movie, is I just don't think it was as realized. I think from the promotional elements, it looked too much like a lot of other animated movies, but then when you went and saw it, it was too much like other animated movies. There was nothing that magic, that insight that Pixar usually gives its audience is completely missing. So I think that may be may have been its downfall. Now, who knows? A lot of movies have a second life once they hit streaming platforms, because, you know, a lot of people just don't go to the movies anymore, which is sad. But maybe it'll bounce back after a month or two, and more people will recognize that. That's what happened with Encanto. I don't know. But for right now, I'm just saying that it was okay. And I think most people will find it just okay, if they find it at all. So yeah, so that's my thoughts on Elio. So all right, let's wrap this up. So final grade for Elio, I gotta go with a C. And part of me wants to say a C minus, and maybe it is. Maybe I will go with C minus, because it just nothing pulls it up past that. Besides the inclusion of Kate Mulgrew, the deep cut sci-fi references, and the brilliance that was Gordon. But nothing else in this movie really comes to play. And it's just kind of there. So yeah, so watch it, don't watch it. I really couldn't give you a strong recommendation one way or the other. I guess it's better than some other things I've seen this year, but it's also a lot worse than a lot of things I've seen this year. So yeah. So there you go. My review is a resounding maybe.
All I know is my gut says maybe.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. So anyway, thanks for joining me. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for listening. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.